Hey, everybody, it's Ed. We've got a new world record for Mountain and Prairie Patreon supporters, so I'm going to go through these names as quickly as I can and hopefully pronounce them all the best I can. As somebody who gets his last name mispronounced constantly, I'm very sensitive to that, so I'm doing my best here. But I want to thank Justin Hancock, Alex Finnigworth, Ben Padilla, Tom Knight, Mary Arnold, David McBee, Simon, Douglas Eisenberg, Sean Donnelly, Dave Wood, Andrew Finn, Alan Weber, Chris Kurtz, Jennifer Nogton, Christopher Lynn, Shelley Svensson, Bo Kelly, Anna Lupinto, Cody, Josh Lavelle, Tom Howrick, Don Sanborn, and Douglas Benson. Whew, got them out. All these folks signed up via Patreon, and I think the reason they signed up is because I just started doing Patreon exclusive podcast episodes, and I'm going to be doing about one per month is the plan. And so if you're interested in learning more about that or supporting the podcast, you can go to mountainandprairie.com/support. There are a lot of different options for doing that, and I really, really, really appreciate all these new folks and everybody else who supported it over the years. I say this over and over and over again, and it's 100% true. If it weren't for Patreon, there really would not be a Mountain and Prairie in its current form. It's the financial foundation of everything I do, and so thank you very much to everybody who signed up. Really appreciate it. This is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast. I'm Ed Robertson. My guest today is Rick Wittenbraker. Rick is the CMO of Howler Brothers, an Austin-based apparel company that creates some of the most unique, stylish, quirky, and highly functional outdoor clothing for adventurers of all stripes. In a little over a decade, Howler has firmly established itself as the go-to brand for anglers, surfers, travelers, and fun seekers, the kind of people who value good times with good friends in cool places. Rick was born and raised in Texas, attended UT Austin, and spent the first years of his career in traditional businesses such as finance and sales. But in 2009, he joined an up-and-coming cooler company known as Yeti, and that's where Rick's genius for storytelling really broke through. He eventually became Yeti's VP of Marketing and was one of the major forces behind Yeti's groundbreaking approach to building a brand through outside-the-box storytelling. Along the way, he met Howler Brothers founders, Chase Heard and Andy Stepanian, and eventually decided to join them and apply his brand-building expertise toward expanding what's now known as the Howlerverse. Rick's been a longtime mentor of mine, and I credit his wisdom and counsel as being one of the main factors that's allowed me to build Mountain and Prairie from a silly little side project into my full-time job. And there are countless creatives and entrepreneurs who have a similar story of Rick generously taking an interest in their project, offering his hard-earned wisdom, and expecting nothing in return. So this episode with Rick was long overdue. We recorded this episode in Austin at the Howler Brothers HQ, and we covered a lot, including Rick's career path, lessons learned from living internationally, his philosophies around building authentic, completely original brands, his ever-present focus on generosity and humility, separating personal identity from brand identity, growing without abandoning core values, the spirit behind the Howler Brothers brand, the Howler Brothers book, some of Rick's favorite books, and much more. A big thanks to Rick for taking the time to chat with me, as well as for everything he's done to help Mountain and Prairie grow and evolve over the years. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. All right, Rick. Round two. A little AV problem. Again. But if I'm going to screw it up, I know I can screw it up with you and you won't get too mad.
At least it was technical and not you.
Yeah. Well, it is kind of me, but I appreciate it. Well, the question I ask you, and I want to ask you again because I think it's important for people to understand, is you've had this really wild career path that's taken you, I mean, literally all over the world. And now you're here in Austin, Texas doing all this cool stuff. But the question I asked you, and then we had to restart, is what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were a kid? And so what was the answer? Take two.
To be real honest, I did not have an answer. It wasn't, I want to be a fireman. I want to be an astronaut. It was not anything succinct and specific like that. I just knew I wanted to go do something cool, something interesting, something fun.
And were you a big like outdoorsman kind of kids, sports? Like what was it like? I feel like our childhoods were slightly similar. I mean, as far as families, as far as what we did. I mean, how did you feel your time pre-college?
I did. I mean, I played lots of sports, just like lots of kids do. And the outdoors was a real big part of what we did growing up. And as often as I could, as much as I could get away with. And that was a lot of hunting, a lot of fishing, but also just other stuff, being out on the lake or hiking or whatever it was, being in the mountains. It really didn't matter. I liked it all.
I remember, I feel like at one point when we were in a conversation, you said there was a time where you thought maybe you want to be a fishing guide. And like that was a thing that had popped in your head. I mean,
yes.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Do I remember that?
No, there was. And that was even a little later in life. And I had done a few jobs and after, in my 20s, and I just got the bug so bad and had gone on some really cool trips with my dad, and we were kind of sitting around talking about it. And I remember saying, I think I might want to do this full time. And when you spend time with guides, especially good, really interesting, cool guides, there's some of my favorite people in the world that I've ever hung out with. And so it was a logical sort of attraction to hang out with those people and to want to do those things that I love all the time. But they'll be the first ones to tell you that they never get to fish. They're always doing work, and they're doing a lot more work than you really realize. And so I think that was brought to my attention, but also that there was a comment later on that was, and it was less about being a guide specifically, but more about what you like doing in your free time versus a, job, career, or whatever you want to call it, a means to make money. And that if you go and make more money or at least craft a sort of existence for yourself, then you can better dictate how much of the fun stuff you get to do. And that's not always about money. It could be about time or availability, but that was sort of a little nugget I borrowed thanks to my dad.
Yeah, I used to really want to be a mountain guide, and I thought it would be the coolest job in the world. And then I went on a guided trip one time, and I remember there was this kind of older guy that was in our crew. Let's just say he had some problems going to squat and go to the bathroom at some point, and then the guide had to go over there and help him. And I would watch that, and I was like, bless that guy. I'm going to give him an extra tip, and he's not being mean. But I was like, I would be ready to murder somebody if I were in that position.
Well, I think that's a very extreme and specific example.
And I could have gone into much better detail.
I do think that there are a lot of things that the great guides, it's just inevitable that they have to go through, endure, figure out. And to be able to come back and to do that job every day with a smile on your face and deliver a great experience, there's a lot to be said for that. And I think it is an incredible pursuit and something I really admire, but I think it also takes the right, just like any job, it takes the right person that's a match for that job.
Oh yeah. I mean, it doesn't just happen that you become a great guide, because there's obviously
over time.
Over every single trip, and building that reputation. And there are a lot of people associated with Howler that are, great guides that are, it's the fishing is one thing, but the ability to deal with people over and over and over in a productive way that makes them feel excited and good. And at times it could be a dangerous deal. So So when you got out of college, what was the job? What was your first job?
So sort of leading up to that, I'd studied in junior high. I'd studied in Mexico and really got the bug for being in other places and meeting other people in other languages. And that led me to study abroad in Spain when I was in college. And so after all that, I had this idea that I really wanted to go to Argentina, and I'd never been there. I'd studied some stuff about it, but I'd never been, and just that was the destination. And so, but back then we're talking 98, I believe it was really difficult to find a job, especially from being in Texas, trying to find a job in Argentina. There wasn't a whole lot of stuff online. And my parents they didn't know anybody down there, or they'd never been. And so there wasn't a whole lot of people to go network with. But I got really, really lucky and found a great job working for a private equity group based out of Dallas, but they already had an investment down there. And so it was better than I deserved, or more than I was qualified for. But I got to go sort of keep tabs on the existing investment down there, and then also be their first filter for looking at new opportunities. And at that time, the Argentina was a real hotbed. There was a lot of interesting investment opportunities happening. There's a lot of bogus stuff too, but there was a lot of really good, genuine opportunities. And so it was a really fun time to be there. And I was very grateful that I found that needle in the haystack.
And I mean, that's your first job out of college. Did you have like a mentor down there helping you, or were you pretty much on your own?
In large part, I was kind of on my own. I mean, we had a little office down there. Well, the company that we had invested in had an office. And so I got to know all them and worked with them. But then really there was a man who was actually our lawyer down there, our attorney down there, who was a really great guy, and just, he took me under his wing. And, I bet I was 15 or so years, maybe 20 years younger than him.
Oh, wow.
But I was older than his kids. So I was kind of in like the half generation between, and he was just great. His name was Gustavo DiMaggio, and he took me under his wing and took me along and to lots of meetings and introduced me to a lot of people, again, probably above my pay grade. Yeah. But I picked up a lot just being with him. And he took me to do some fun stuff too, like to his estancia and outdoors things. And he was just a great first kind of on the job mentor to have.
And when you decided to head out of there, what prompted you to say, all right, this has been good, but I'm ready for another challenge here?
I was pretty convinced I never was going to live, that I was going to live down there my whole life. And then what happened, it's a longer series of events, but I basically got moved from a project in Argentina to a different project in El Salvador.
Oh, wow.
And I stayed there for a little over 3 years. And then, long story short, I stayed on until we sold that business. And then I had made a deal with my bosses, like, hey, I'll stay on till we sell it. And when we sell it, I'll be done.
Got it.
And so at that point, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was in a good spot and feeling good about things. And then I started dating my now wife, and she was already in New York. So I was thinking, okay, maybe I'll go move to New York and find a job up there. And we had been dating less than a month when 9/11 happened. And she was up there in Manhattan for all of that. Oddly, on that day, I was the only person who could call to her cell phone, the only person that could get through. And then, I was the only person she could call out. And so that whole day, her family is back in Texas and they're all, scared to death. And so I was sort of the switchboard operator, passing messages back and forth. And I had already had a ticket to go visit her on 9/12, and that obviously didn't happen. But I was on the first flight up to LaGuardia once they started letting planes fly again. And I just sort of said, that's it, I'm staying. And so I came back to shuttle some stuff back and forth, but really that was it. And so it was, and I love New York, but that was the worst time to move there to try and find a job right after 9/11. And so it took a while, but had some fun in the city, and we were, dating and having fun. So it wasn't bad, but I moved to New York after that.
When did you realize that marketing was something you're interested in? Because I would guess in the first few jobs, you're kind of doing everything, a lot of different responsibilities, figuring out how do you go about being grown up with a job, the whole deal. That
still working on that.
I remember when I was, early on in my career, you think you've got it figured out, but then you look back and you're like, no, I didn't know anything. But like, when did you start getting the marketing bug or be like, I think I might be interested in doing more of this?
To be honest, I never really, it wasn't a conscious thing, and it was never something where I set out to go do that. I think it just it was always sort of a function of what I was doing to some degree, some marketing, some what you might call like biz dev. And so I think that I liked it. And so I think I probably leaned into that stuff more, even without realizing it. And then it wasn't until I had already moved back to Austin. This is now fast forwarding several years. And I was helping some buddies put on an event. It was the fly fishing film tour.
Yeah, I went to that one.
But before it ever really got legs and became a national thing, you could be an independent promoter and bring the show to your town. You basically are just buying a license. They send you the DVDs and then you put on the show. And if you show it to your buddies and don't charge them anything, that's fine. Or if you want to sell tickets and make money, that's fine too. But I worked with some friends just as a project. I was between jobs and like just something to do. And I'd asked the then fledgling Yeti coolers to be a sponsor of this event. And they said yes. And so I took them out to lunch to say thanks. And we started talking about the aspects of what they were doing from a marketing perspective. And I kept asking these questions, and they were so focused on making this killer product and on wholesale selling into the like other retailers, that there was all this stuff that they probably would have gotten around to, but at that time they weren't doing it. And
like, what's an example of something like that?
They weren't selling coolers on their website, and they were making hats and not giving them to their buddies, but they weren't selling them on their site. They weren't giving them to customers, and it was just all these things, but also they were, and to their credit, they were already sort of up and running off to the races. And so it's not like business was bad. Business was good, but they just wanted, they were focused on these things over here. And I saw these other things that, in a long story short, I kind of went back to Roy and said, look, here's all these things that you're not doing that I think I could help you with. And he said, cool, go for it. And so they sort of deputized me to be able to do some of this stuff. And I didn't really set out to be a, consultant or whatever. It just sort of happened that way and out of interest and opportunity. And it was a lot of fun. And so it snowballed from doing some projects into doing a lot more stuff and bigger projects. And then it was basically, we just want all your time once you come in-house.
Nice. And when you look back on that time, were there any specific projects like in the first half of your time there where you're like, oh, we're on to something here, like where it kind of clicked? Because I would imagine there's a trial and error aspect to it, and just maybe this will work, maybe this wouldn't. But are there any memories that you have when you're like, oh, okay, I think there's something special happening here?
I mean, I always thought the product was amazing, just like everybody did. And I loved, selfishly, that they were pretty focused on the outdoors because it made it fun and interesting for me. But really the thing that for me, that was the light bulb, and it wasn't necessarily this one thing, but really when I kept trying to like figure out what is the lightning in the bottle? What is the magic? And for me, I kept trying to zoom out and find where was that happening? And I just realized that, Yeti didn't invent coolers. They didn't really even invent the premium cooler, the rotomolded cooler for that matter. People had coolers, knew how to use coolers, knew what to put in them, when to take them, all that stuff. But with a better product and leaning into these activities that they love to do, really we were taking these things that they already loved to do, and we're just putting that on steroids.
Yeah.
And so it was making their fun times better. It was making their weekends better, their vacation time better, whatever. And we didn't have to tell them what activities to do. They were already doing it. But it makes all those times that you already love even better. And so what happens is you start sort of the migration of making decisions in your brain to making decisions with your heart or with emotion. And so that's where I think people really get pulled into a product or a brand or a story, is when they start making decisions with their heart or with their emotion, and less about trying to be rational about it.
But when were you looking around? Were there other brands that inspired you to do that? Because I feel like now when you look back, Yeti had kind of reinvented or set a standard for marketing by not really marketing. I mean, they're not jamming the cool in your face saying, buy this cooler. They're doing all this other cool stuff. But I feel like when Yeti was coming up, it was a category, it was a way of marketing that I had never seen before.
Yeah.
But like, how did you even think of that? I mean, were there other companies you admired or other people you admired, or was it just kind of a idea?
They had already, before I started working with them, they had already had a foray into outdoors with Flip Pallet and some other names in the space. And like, especially growing up, some of the things that I really loved and gravitated towards were ski brands in the 80s. And they did, I thought, a really cool job of making it feel very aspirational, where you feel like, and this is probably a little naive, but feeling like, oh my gosh, those skis or boots or whatever will make me a better skier. And you see it all over the place. And you see it with makeup and beauty products. You see it with, all kinds of things. But I just loved it. And I felt like there was also this thing of sort of being part of a tribe.
Yes.
And so I think when you applied that to the outdoors, which in a large part was sort of overlooked, and a large part from an industry standpoint was, sort of the industry itself was kind of a laggard in a lot of ways, and sort of behind the curve and following more consumer leading things. And so it really became fun and interesting to be able to try and take some of these ideas or practices from other arenas and apply it to outdoors. And so now I think Yeti is the standard by which most outdoor brands have kind of mapped their playbook.
Well, the tribe thing is huge, because I think about this with all brands, particularly outdoor brands, but I really think about it with Yeti that, I remember you see people with Patagonia stickers on their car, Mountain Hardwear stickers, but the fact that people want to put a cooler sticker on their car. I mean, of all things, it makes perfect sense now, but back then, it's just this thing that it's almost like a commodity in some ways, that everybody's got a cooler and whoever thinks about the cooler. And so not only was the technology great, and it's a cooler that works very, very, very well, but people want everybody to know that they have that cooler.
Yeah.
And they're part of that tribe.
It's interesting, because one of the things about, like, frankly, where the opportunity for Yeti came was that, in the 70s and 80s, originally coolers were sold at outdoor stores. And then they became these cheap, disposable, crummy, $30 whatever. And they weren't making those specialty retailers enough money, and it takes up a lot of floor space. And so they shifted from being a specialty outdoor item to a very commoditized general merchandise item sold at Target or Walmart or whatever. And so what happened was they kind of, in a way, sort of bifurcated away from the outdoor arena. And so the Yeti had this opportunity to bring it back to the outdoors, back to sort of its place of origin in some regard. And so it was this real opportunity to bring that back to those people and those retailers and that community. And then, talking about a tribe, the brands you mentioned, both apparel brands and equipment too, but mostly apparel. And so people can buy those products and wear them and walk down the street, even if they're not doing that activity. Yeti was a lot more difficult, especially in the early days when we only had hard coolers. And one of the ways that we did that, or tried to achieve that, was with hats. Hats were an easy, low cost, easy way to do that. And in the early days, especially it was like a guy's not going to carry his cooler down the street, but he'll wear that hat. And then you see another guy who knows what a Yeti is or has a Yeti, and he sees the guy across the street with it, walking down the sidewalk with a Yeti hat on, and he kind of gives him the nod, the Pez, like, hey man, I see you. We're in it. We're in it. I got to get you. So that was something where the hat became like what you can take with you and walk around with more commonly. So the hats really exploded for us, but that was more from a product standpoint, but that was all part of how do we get people bought into this idea and have them reflect what the benefits they're getting from the cooler into the rest of their life.
And when you think back on your time there, any particular projects that come to mind is either just super fun, like it was just a fun thing to do, or super effective, just almost a new way of doing things? I mean, I would imagine it's a long list of cool stuff.
Yeah, we got to do a lot of neat stuff. And I think because we were sort of creating a new category, so to speak, that a lot of the stuff we got to do was really fun. And for me, I mean, look, I'm a fan of a lot of these people we got to work with. And so for me, getting to work with Flip Palette and Jose Wehebe, who I'd watched on TV for years, and Bill Dance, or these other guys, even just getting to meet them was super fun and fulfilling and like really just cool and interesting. But really, I think the most fun was when you just getting to see when the effort you're making or the work you're putting into it, and it comes out, tenfold or whatever, because this is flourishing and people are loving it. And you're, even if it's a very roundabout passive way, you're helping to make their fun times better.
Oh yeah.
And they love it and they respond to it. And so that was also like it was fun. It was rewarding.
When did you decide you were ready to move on from that? I mean, was that an actual decision, or did you just find other things that kind of captured your attention? I mean, what was because I would think it seems like that was in the marketing world and just business world, what an exciting place to be. So what made you want to move on?
It was make no mistake, it was a great ride.
Oh yeah.
And we had a ton of fun doing it, or I had a ton of fun doing it. But Yeti had reached a point and taken on a private equity investor. And it just reached a moment where I said, man, I've gotten to do all this fun, cool stuff. There's a shift going on here, and I don't know if it's going to be as fun. But also it was really more just about, I feel like I don't know, that chapter was complete.
Sure.
In a way. And I kind of was aspiring for something else. And during my time there, a mutual friend had introduced me to Chase Heard, co-founder of Howler Brothers and my now business partner. And we just hit it off and became friends. And so that was while I was still at Yeti and in parallel. And then we started talking shop. And, I think after a while we just said, hey, what if we work together on this? It was longer than that. Took more involved in that
thing where to Yeti, where you just had some ideas like, hey, y'all are obviously doing great stuff here, but here are a few extra.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like Chase and Andy Stepanian, the other co-founder, are two of the most incredibly creative and talented people I've ever met, and so they had all this incredible stuff happening, and it was sort of really eye-opening, especially at that time. And I was a fan and a customer from the get-go, and I just loved it. But neither one of them, both done really cool things professionally, but neither one had done a product like this or anything in the outdoors world. And so some of this was new territory for them. And so it was easier for me being at Yeti to say, oh, well, you need to meet these guys, or, oh, let me introduce you to my friend over here, or, whatever that might be, and helping them just as a friend, really navigate some of those early crossroads. And so, especially Chase and I, because he was here in Austin, we started meeting for beers probably once a month, and he'd come with a few questions and I'd come with a few ideas, and it just kind of went on from there and grew pretty organically and snowballed. But we hit it off. And so we tried to make it work, and then they weren't quite ready. The company wasn't quite ready to do that. And I said, no big deal. I had another offer, and I went and did that for a while. And that was a miserable, little hiccup there for 9 months, but it led me to coming back to them, and we ended up working out a deal. So in the big picture, it was all sort of part of the path.
Uh-huh.
But yeah. And so then we worked out a deal, and now I've been here for coming up on 10 years.
Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy.
And so when you had the little bump in the road there, you had kids and everything.
Oh yeah.
Like that.
We already had 3 kids.
What was that like? I mean, was that kind of like, oh shit, what's
well, it was
there?
it was a job and it paid well.
Yeah.
And it was a little more high profile, at least in the Austin scene. And it just was very, very different than what was pitched to me or what was presented to me. And the reality of it was very different. And where they were in sort of their process was very different from what I was initially told before I started. And so it was a very frustrating thing to feel like I sort of got hoodwinked, and frustrating too, because I was ready to go and they weren't as ready as they said, or it was just different. And it was, you know, you learned a lot of things. And I think just as important as you learn what you don't want to do, I learned a lot of things I don't want to do again. Mm-hmm. But you know, the silver lining is I met a lot of great people there and became friends with a lot of great people. And 2 of the people I met there and worked with there now work with us here at Howler.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And so that, you know, in retrospect, like it had its value.
Well, when I think of you, I think of people, and you just build these long-term, very rock solid relationships that don't happen quickly. And they build up over years and years and years. And so like when you're, not to skip ahead too much, but you know, you advise a lot of companies, you invest in companies, you know, obviously you've got a lot of time and effort into Howler. When you're looking at opportunities, how much do you weigh the people versus the business idea?
It's sort of a trick question, because no matter what number you put on it, if that part is not there, it'll go to 0.
Sure.
But, you know, to be academic about it, it's north of 90%. Because really, like, you look at it, and I think a great person or someone who's really driven to do what they're setting out to do, they will figure out and solve for the challenges or the potholes or the mistakes. And even if they start off with a bad product or a bad idea, a good people will get to a good spot. But if you have a great product or idea with bad people, it'll probably never go anywhere.
I heard some interview, it might have been on like Tim Ferriss' podcast, but he was talking with some veteran private equity guy who'd been in Silicon Valley and had retired. And the guy, he's a quantitative guy. And after he was kind of hung it all up, he did a kind of a postmortem on every deal he did, every deal he passed on, the wins, the losses, the whole deal. And he figured out, he said that if he had just bet on people and not bet on businesses, he would have exponentially been more successful.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes he would get, there's a really, really great idea with B- people, and it would never work out.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
And I think you can get sort of seduced by things like, oh, the size of the opportunity, the market cap, you know, or the whatever that may, margins, or, you know, any of those, the very metric things, the measurable things. And those are all important. But I think it's easy to get seduced by that and say, oh man, if we could just go get 1% of this giant market. But really, you know, that's, I think, picking to that, to concur with that comment, like picking the right people, it may take them longer. It may end up being something totally different than what they set out to do, but they can make it successful. And at the end of the day too, I just love working with good people.
Is so important.
And it's, I really think it's like the most important thing. And so like when you get to work with great people, then the journey, no matter how difficult it may be, is better.
Oh yeah.
You know, and more fun and more rewarding. And so whether you're working directly as an operator, you know, 9 to 5, or you're an advisor or investing or whatever, it's kind of the same. I mean, you're in one way or another, you're investing, whether that's time, talent, or treasure.
Yeah.
And so getting to do that with good people or experts, or, you know, people who are really good at what they do, like that's awesome.
That's what it's all. I mean, the best, probably the most fun job I've ever had was as far from anything as I've ever done. I was working for a publicly traded real estate development firm in Washington, D.C., but it was because the people were so great.
Yeah.
You know, it was just really good people that like to work hard and were very focused and very professional and just nice to be around. I mean, ultimately I chose a different path, but that was the best work experience I've had, I'd say, which was interesting.
Well, and this goes even beyond work, but really about people and relationships and friendships. But if you build a great rapport with somebody in a friendship, that'll last through decades and lots of jobs. And it doesn't even matter what they're doing or you're doing anymore, or whether or not you work together anymore. But if it's just sort of a cog in the wheel and it's not necessarily, there's nothing there. It's not that that's evil or anything, but really just, hey, I don't even know what that person's doing anymore. And so I think that for me, one of my favorite things, and you asked earlier about marketing, and I don't even really consider myself a marketing person. And the thing that I love the most is people.
Yes.
And interacting with people and building relationships with people and building relationships with other companies and all those things. And I think it's the most important thing that any company has, the innermost, circle on the bullseye of any company is its team and the people. Closer to the middle even than customers, no matter what the disposition is, like really your staff, your team is your most important.
Well, yeah. And just, you're seeing that around here today at your headquarters, and everybody is working hard, but you can tell everybody gets along. And I would imagine, and it's, I don't know, it's inspiring to see, because I feel like anytime you get above about 6-7 people, it can get real complicated real quick if you don't pay attention.
I would say we have a really awesome group of people, and they're all, good at what they're doing, and they're fun, and they're bringing character to the team. But it's just so, I mean, really for Howler Brothers, it's in our name, and it's our core tenet of our brand is brotherhood. That's the number one pillar of the Howler brand. This is more of an internal thing, but really it's how we deal with everybody as a team, each other, how we deal with our customers, how we deal with our retailers, our sales reps, like everybody. It doesn't matter that it's about being and working together and being, that brotherhood, that friendship, that bond. And that's really like how we frame everything. And so you can be really good at a job, and that might be great, but if you're not a good part of our little community, it's probably not the place for you. And we're probably not going to offer you a job. We've learned over time too that, you can it's not impossible to lose sight of that at times, but really when you come right back to it and you read it again, or you think about it again, that is what's most important to us. And it is what we care about the most, and how we want to treat people and how we want to deal with people. And by the way, when you do that, it's just more fun.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. Definitely. When you think about the amount of time you spend working, I mean, you don't want to be around a bunch of clowns all day, I couldn't imagine that. I mean, I've been in that situation. Actually, I can't imagine it. For people who aren't familiar, how would you describe Howler Brothers? Because I feel like it'd be so hard to describe it.
It is a little hard to describe, and it's something that throughout the years we have. I'm laughing because we have gone through this exercise a number of times, and it's something that is very much an amalgam of a lot of different things and spirits and energies, but it at the end of the day comes back to people.
Yes.
But Howler Brothers, to be a little more down to earth, we're an outdoor apparel brand. We're based here in Austin, Texas. And the inspiration came from our co-founders, Chase and Andy, taking a few things, but part of it was taking surf trips down to Costa Rica. And where the name comes from is the howler monkeys that are down there, and they're in the trees, and they have it's like the loudest call of any land animal. And at first it's a little off-putting and frightening, but when you've been down there for a while, you sort of grow used to it, and it becomes this almost like a bass line or a soundtrack to your trip. And it's really cool and interesting. And they tend to travel in packs, but really there's a it's not brother singular, it's brothers plural. It's us, it's we, not me. And those were sort of things that they brought in, Chase and Andy, from pre-launch was like these are important to us. At the time too, it really stood out from anything else in the outdoor world. Everything else was man versus nature, or me versus the elements, or me. Look what I did. Look what I conquered. I climbed this mountain. I did this. I did that. And so we really took a different stance, and they from the get-go said we want it to be a little different, and we want it to be about the shared experiences and the in-between moments, and the the flat tires on the journey, or the roadside tacos, or all those little things. And really it's all the memories you have years after a trip with your friends. It's all those memories and the funny stories you tell.
Yep.
Like that's what you hold on to the most, not one specific wave or this perfect photo or this other thing. It's all that funny stuff and the in-between stuff, or all those things that add flavor. And so that's really what we tried to embody from the get-go.
There's a quote in the book, the Howler Brothers book that y'all put out that I love, and I have it right next to my desk, and I'll look at it. I'll tell you. It's
good to put your coffee cup on.
I love that thing, man. But there's a quote, maybe Chase might have written it, but it says, it's Howler Brothers surf culture mixed with vintage Western wear, mixed with streetwear, mixed with tiki gods, mixed with fly fishing, all set to the soundtrack of a dub reggae mariachi country band. And the thing that I love about Howler is, because I love to surf, I like fishing, but I like all this stuff, but I'm not obsessed with any of it. But what I love is that you've taken all these crazy interests and you've overlapped them, and in the middle is Howler Brothers. And I think about with Mountain and Prairie, I'm not comparing Mountain and Prairie to Howler Brothers, but it's all my weird interests, ultra marathons, art, books, conservation, ranches, all this kind of stuff. And in the middle is my weird thing. And so seeing the success y'all have had, it's showed me that there's a market for, no matter how tight your interest or in that Venn diagram, how like it's a pinprick, but there are all these people out there that share an interest in that. And I think ultimately it's authentic. And that's what y'all do. It's you, it's authentic, and people are attracted to authenticity.
Well, I was laughing because I think you're basically saying there's a market opportunity for the weird.
Yes,
but
there is.
Really, I think that what it comes down to is, one of the things that Chase Andy from the get-go said was, we don't want to pick. Like we want to do all of the stuff. It's not or.
Yes.
And we like all these different things, and we want to go do all these different things. And so how do we pull all that together? And, I think a lot of companies, a lot of brands, even in the outdoor world, a lot of brands historically were very siloed and very like, we only do X, or we only focus on this activity or this thing. And that's fine. And it makes it simplified. But, our founders said, hey, when we go on a trip, for example, we want to do all these activities.
Yeah.
And we want to be able to do it and have fun and feel like the gear we're wearing, like the clothes we're wearing, and not feel like, oh, I'm going to do this one extreme activity with all these gear and clothes, and then I have to go change and then go do something else. And then after that, like, I don't want to wear that out. And so it became this, well, if you got to dream it up, what would it look like? Well, let's go aim for that and being able to do all the things. So we talk a lot about surfing. We talk a lot about fly fishing, especially saltwater fly fishing.
Yep.
But the truth is we like to do all the stuff. And so in every place you go and every group you're with brings different opportunities, new things to do, or new, a certain place may offer different stuff that the next place doesn't. And so it's like, let's go grab all of it.
As the company's gotten, more and more successful and grown, has there ever been any pressure, or have you ever felt any pressure to, I don't know, go more mainstream or not be as weird? Because I go, because as you scale, we were talking about this earlier today, we were shooting shit, is that, when you start scaling things, it becomes harder to keep that personality in place. And so it seems like y'all are still in this amazing spot where you can be as weird as you want, and you continue to be able to attract like-minded weirdos like myself. But like, how is that kind of push and pull of growth versus keeping it weird?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think in any business, in any company, there is a natural tug of war between staying core and authentic and true to who you are versus growing.
Yes.
And that is a natural tug of war. So it is a delicate balance to try and achieve both. And I will say, and this is again sort of hard to quantify, but we have this sort of inner gut check, let's call it a sniff test. When we go, let's say we go design a new shirt and we're looking at it and kind of sitting back and talking about it. Do we like this? And one of our term for it, and one of the things that we say is that, if it's not quite there yet, we're like, that it just doesn't feel Howler enough. And I think it's less about a quantifiable, shove it into a spreadsheet formula kind of thing, and way more about really understanding personality. And I really think that truly the essence of a brand is really a personality. And it's not a logo. It's not a color palette. It is personality. So knowing your personality or your archetype or who you are as a company, and similarly who you are not,
yes, makes
it really much easier to say that is us. Yes, that's inside the circle, let's say, or that's not us. That shirt is not quite there yet, or I'm just not feeling it. It doesn't feel like something we would wear or that our audience would wear. And so it's less definable.
Yeah. But
it is very much something that we bring up all the time.
I remember one time you were telling me about that idea of the brand's personality, and that may not be your personality or it may not be Chase's personality, and that you got to figure out a way to separate yourself and look at it almost like a character in a movie or something.
Yes,
because
exactly.
Can you talk about that a bit more?
Yeah. It's something that I really love, and we try really hard to sort of embody and practice here, but a character, whether it's a book or a movie or anything, has a personality, and that involves the way they act, the way they talk, the way they walk, like all those things, and their background, that all, just like a regular human, that all that stuff combines to make who that person is or who that character is. And in the case of a company, I really think that it is its own thing. And even with a extremely strong founder, there's a lot of overlap there on the Venn diagram, but there should be a part of the founder that is outside of the brand and a part of the brand that is outside of the founder. And in the best instances, people really hone in and get an understanding of who their brand is, and they understand where those deltas lie. And the best execution comes when people say, okay, now I'm going to basically get into character of the brand. And so that might change the way I would respond to somebody. It might be like, and I'm not saying change who you are as a person. I'm saying when you're acting as the company.
Sure.
And so that comes into the content you put out, the products you sell, how you do stuff. I mean, it all matters. And the truth is that every person and personality and brand, for that matter, also has shortcomings or weaknesses. And so there's things but when you understand those and know things you're good at or things you're not good at, it also keeps you a little more honest, and it helps you navigate better because you're not all things to all people. And so I believe when you really have a good understanding of that, it resonates and people see it and they say, oh man, I know who that character is. I know how they're going to act. And that really feels like, appropriate or what they should be doing.
When you're advising, I feel like you've been doing it long enough. You probably just do it and do this, what I'm going to say instinctively, but there's so much to be said just for taking action and for starting, even when you can't figure it out. And like today you were showing me around and there was some equipment that you guys have for fitting clothes properly and understanding colors properly. And it's pretty high tech stuff that one of the team members who's been doing it for a while brought in. But 3, 4, 5 years ago, you were not doing that.
Yeah.
And I would guess that like when you look back, you're like, man, I can't believe we weren't doing that, but you just went and you would go. So how do you advise businesses or people, friends that are doing stuff on the balance between taking action with imperfect knowledge and making stuff happen versus you don't want to be reckless, How do you think about that?
That's a good question because I tend to lean towards taking action.
Yeah.
And it's better to take action and be off or be wrong or have an opportunity to improve on the next go round versus not taking action. And sometimes you just have to do it and jump.
Yeah.
That pool is going to be cold, but you got to jump in there, man. But I think that there's a lot of, especially when starting a new company, there's a lot of friction. And part of that is I'm worried about what people say or what they think or what they're going to do and how they react to this, how they respond to what I'm offering. And sometimes you just got to get out there, but there is a balance there. And I think that's another thing that separates some of the really good people or good operators from people who maybe don't find as much success. But I really when you think about it, if you wait too long, you might miss a window.
Yeah.
And so that's why I lean towards taking action, and you can always make it better the next time. And part of that response and improvement is not only your path, but how people receive and perceive you.
Sure.
And all different companies and brands are different, but that tends to be where I lean.
One other thing that always strikes me about you is just the generosity that you bring to relationships and to
not anymore.
Yeah. You're willing to share knowledge and share information. And I don't know. I mean, I guess it's kind of a dumb question and asking humble people this, but where does that come from? Because you've got limited time. You got a lot of stuff going on, yet you're always willing to help people, or, you're very willing to help people. Is there a certain type of person that you just notice? You're like, I'm interested in what they're doing. I mean, where does that come from? Because is that a thing you've always had? Is your family, your dad and your mom like that?
I think to some degree, it's selfish. It's out of personal interest. You just want to get involved with things that are outside of what you're doing today. And so I found that when you can offer to help and you're maybe adding value or helping out or taking out the trash or whatever that is, that it's hard for people to say no. Yeah. And so it is an easy, and it breaks down barriers or people drop their guard. And so it's an easy way to get to know somebody and maybe get involved or just connect with people. And I hadn't really thought about it, honestly, very much. I think I just kind of just plugged away and did it. And I liked it. But, my dad passed away several years ago, and it struck me though. And I always saw him doing that.
Yes.
And that might be helping a friend. And he was an attorney, but instead of billing his buddy for a little advice, he would just kind of do it.
Yeah.
Sometimes if some client, he realized, man, they're in a real pinch and they can't pay their bill. He's just like, you know what, never mind. And so, but you see that little by little, I guess, or I saw it growing up. But then after my dad passed and at the service and the people that approached us, my family after, and they kept bringing up these stories of my dad saying, about my dad saying, oh, he didn't charge me, or I'll never forget the time that he did this for me, and then he never sent me a bill. And it wasn't just about billing as an attorney. It was helping out in other ways. And it really resonated with me, or maybe even just sort of crystallized for me that, oh, this is a really, not just a nice thing to be a nice neighbor. That's great. But it's a good way to sort of, I don't know if you want to say pay it forward or whatever, but just to put it out there and just to help. And it makes you feel good, and not everything needs to be so transactional, or, you can just do it, but also you can have fun along the way.
So what do you think when you think about the future of Howler Brothers? I mean, I feel like it's, from my perspective on the outside looking in, it seems like it's just firing all cylinders, growing. I mean, you got cool employees, everybody. I mean, it just seems like a great deal. Where do you see it going? Do you have any goals for it?
We do, but I think to maybe succinctly answer is one of our favorite things is allowing ourselves to do the fun products and offerings or doing the fun things that we love and we get excited about. And there's been times where we did less of that and we tried to be more formulaic, or we tried to be more middle of the road. And it was never bad, but it just maybe didn't have the same spark, and it also wasn't received as well. And so what we have found is that, at least in our case, when we have a notion and we put some effort behind it and say, we really want to do this weird, funky, special collection about whatever, and that it resonates with people, and may not be for everybody, but for the subset of our audience, or the people out there that really love this one weird thing, oh man, they absolutely go crazy for it. And so for us, it's been this really fun, rewarding thing that you can try these new things, or push the boundaries, or do something that may on paper feel really weird. And why the hell would they ever go make this? But when you do it with conviction and have fun making that happen, then it resonates.
Sure.
And so it's really, I think one of the things that I'm most excited about going forward is we have this sort of renewed excitement and vigor around doing more of that, and doing it in a bigger way, and not really trying to make everything match to some sort of transaction or some, especially in e-commerce, it's real easy to try and want to measure clicks or whatever.
Yeah.
But instead, just doing it because we love it, and doing it because it's something that we want to do. And I think those are the moments where we've sort of been the best version of ourselves. And so I think we recently have said, let's do more of that. Let's double down on that.
Yeah. It's almost like you've gotten the feedback, and you can just be more yourself, just be super confident that maybe this is crazy, but it's what we want to do, and it's worked in the past. Let's keep trying it.
Yeah. And that's it. And I think too, is like it gets me really fired up to think about continuing to grow the team, and not for the sake of growth, but more about, man, if we go find somebody really good about this, it allows us to do more. And not just because it's really not about some revenue number or some made up projection for next year because we decided we want to grow X% next year. It's really about what other capabilities can we gain, or whether that's through bandwidth or skill set or experience or whatever it is. But when you bring good people on board, it grows. It's greater than the sum of the parts.
Yes.
And so how do we go add more great people to the roster so we can go do more and be greater than the sum of the parts?
Well, man, I'm a super fan. I just feel like you've been so helpful to me over the years, and so generous with your time and sharing all this wisdom. And and then to see how this company, which is an extension of you and your partners and all the great folks here, it's super inspiring. And I've loved observing, and I love my gear, even though you and I are wearing the same shirt today.
Well, that happens with us all the time, actually. And
really?
we always have to text each other, like when we're heading to trade shows, like, hey, I'm wearing this blue shirt today. Just make sure y'all aren't wearing this one.
One thing that you and I share in common that we love is good books, reading. Any books come to mind? It could be books you've recently read, books that are just important to you.
One I'll mention, because we were talking about it this morning, is Goodbye to a River by John Graves. It's a little Texas specific, but not really. And it's a pretty important, it's a really awesome story, and it's a great book. And if you like the outdoors, no question you'll love this. In history, you'll love this book. But it also, I think, is sort of a keystone book for a lot of, I call it, outdoor writing.
Yes.
And especially in the second half of the 20th century. And that's a great one. I love that book. And then, it's again sort of doubling down on the Texas theme, but Lonesome Dove is absolutely unbelievable. And growing up here, the TV series was, something that everyone lived and breathed. And I'll be real honest, I never read the book until I was already married, and my wife made me read it. And it's just like so many things. It was just so much even better than.
Yeah. You feel like those people.
Oh my gosh. And it's just that much more in depth. So I even though it's a thick book and it's a lot of pages, but it is absolutely worth the endeavor.
I agree with, I've got Goodbye River. I'm committed to reading it now, but Lonesome Dove, I remember I read it when I was 31.
Yeah.
And it's when we were in Costa Rica, actually. I remember it took, it's kind of like the intro, almost like setting the stage is 200 pages.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but I don't know. It's so incredible that I remember reading it when we lived in New York, and I had to ride like a 50-minute train ride each way to and from work.
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't wait to get on the train to crack open
so good
that 1,200 page tome.
And I don't read novels hardly.
And so I gave you one, nonfiction. I gave you fiction, and the last one I'm going to give you is by my friend Darren Roberts, and it's called Call an Audible, and it is his real story about going from Harvard Law to coaching in the NFL and then life beyond. And it's an incredible story in and of itself. And he's an incredible person and such a great friend. But beyond that, the way he breaks it down, each chapter, into these very actionable things and lessons to learn and things that you can apply to your life, God, it is so great. And I can't recommend that book enough. And it speaks so much to reaching for your dreams, putting in the hard work to get there, and then, evolving along the way. It's just an awesome read, and it's super entertaining.
Oh yeah. I read it. I put it in my book recommendation email a few months ago, and I loved it. And it's not super, super thick.
No.
And he's written in a way that he did a great job with it, because there's no extra nonsense. Like everything you need is there, and you get the story. And I just was taken by exactly what you said. He had big ambitions, and he was willing to work extremely hard, and he doesn't make it's not easy.
Yeah.
But he keeps pushing.
And I think it's actually really, although he was doing it from more of a, I guess a professional perspective, I think it's the function of coaching, but I think it's extremely applicable to any entrepreneur.
Yes.
Because it is this dream that doesn't make sense on paper.
No.
And that everyone laughs at you about, and everyone tells you you're crazy for even attempting. He breaks it down and he shows you these ways, and it's about, some of it is challenging yourself. Some of it is how you interact with others. Some of it is just figuring out ways to add value, which I think is a huge thing. But, at the end of the day, it's just a great story. And so even if you're not trying to improve your work life or anything, or go on some entrepreneurial journey, it's just a great story, and it's fun to read.
I loved it. And I initially found Darren through you, because I know you had followed him on LinkedIn, and you've been nice enough to introduce us. And he's a very inspiring guy, inspiring and instructive.
Yeah. And he's also really funny and a ton of fun to be with. So all of that comes together for a great personality in that book. I
agree. Any parting words? You know the podcast.
Type of people. Well, I want to thank you for coming down to Austin and asking me to be on here for your least listened to episode you'll ever
Hell
have.
No, man. You're the man of mystery. Everybody wants to know.
But I thank you for that, and I've totally enjoyed being a fan of the listener of the podcast, and so I'm just flattered to get to do it. It's been fun hanging out with you.
Hell yeah, man. Well, thanks for everything. Thanks for doing this, and we'll go eat some good food now. Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. I know your time is valuable, so it means the world that you spend it listening. If you want to support the podcast and help it to continue to spread and grow, there are a few ways you can help. Number one, pass it along to a friend or share it on social media. Word of mouth recommendations are the most powerful way for ideas to spread, so I'd love it if you could share the podcast with a few pals who might enjoy it. Number two, you go to Apple Podcasts and give it a 5-star review. Good reviews encourage the Apple overlords to suggest the podcast to others. So there's a link in the notes if you'd be so kind as to give it 5 stars. Number three, you can support the podcast financially via Patreon, and there are exclusive benefits for those who do. including a monthly behind-the-scenes newsletter, Mountain and Prairie stickers, live and recorded video chats with podcast guests, and much more. Number 4, I've also got 2 emails that I send out. The first is my weekly email called Good News from the American West, which I send out every Wednesday. It's only positive news, something we can all use a little more of these days. And my other email is my bi-monthly book recommendations email. 1 email every other month with 5, 6, 7, or 8 books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The thousands of people on both of these lists will vouch for me. No spam or other funny business. And number 5, finally, check out my online store for Mountain and Prairie stickers, shirts, and coffee mugs. I've got some really cool designs from Western artists with more on the way. So head to mountainandprairie.com/shop to check it all out. I'd love to connect with you. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, so look me up on either of those platforms by my name or through the links on my website. All right, that's it. Thanks so much for your support.